So thanks again for being here. There might be other folks trickling in. I don't know if there will be or not, but this is a great group, and I really appreciate you guys being here. So this is a recap that I'm going to share with you now. A part two of our event. So as we begin, it's crucial for us to acknowledge the deep importance of spirituals and gospel music, which is closely linked to the civil rights movement, especially with the African American church. So, spirituals and gospel music are intricately woven into African American culture, arising from the deep experiences of slavery. In times of hardship, this particular genre of music was and still continues to be consistently delivered with a sense of hope, with a strong focus on freedom, justice, and the aspirations for a better future. Gospel music was used to uplift spirits during times of hardship and to create a sense of community among activists and people that were enslaved. At the core, spirituals and gospel music are deeply rooted in biblical teachings, offering comfort and a pathway for connection with God and our pursuit of justice. So, to begin with, what I would like to do, I'm not going to put, you guys might be wondering why I don't share the links in where you can see it now, because it's for copyright purposes, it's easier that you look at it yourself and that is not on my recording. So here we go with the first one, and I'll give you instructions. This song is about 3 minutes and 55 seconds, and it's called Angel. It's one of those call and response songs. And I would like for you guys to really listen to it. And then I want you to think about how could you use such a song? Maybe you can change the words for an event that you are going to be either hosting in the coming year or participating in. How could you teach this to someone else? Maybe not using all the words that you hear, but the rhythm of the song. So think about it as you listen, please. Here we go. You guys see it? Can you open it? Okay, good. Okay, I think I was behind you guys a little bit. Has everyone listened? All right, let's talk then. Are you guys done? Or am I rushing it? You're done? Okay. How could you modify this song for a song at a rally? It's a tough question, isn't it? How could it be modified to use at a rally?
Um, I don't know about modifying it, but I know that it's encouraging. Um, because rallies really you have to have faith. So I don't know about modifying it, but I think that does speak to a person's soul. It's encourages uplifting. I don't think it needs to be modified.
Okay.
We could replace the words like Trump got to go. Every
We're
time
not allowed to say
Harry,
that. We're not allowed to
Yeah,
say that.
we're not use that name today. Yeah.
We're not allowed to say that.
or that there's injustice around. Everywhere I go, there's injustice around. And
Hmm.
so you just can modify it that way as well.
Yep.
Hmm.
I like that.
Mhm.
John.
I could see it, whatever we're there. What are we here for? We are here for the children. Whatever it is, asking a question and getting the answer on the response.
That's a good one, John. What are we? I can't get the rhythm of my mind now. What
Right.
are we here for? We're here for the children. Something like that.
I like that.
Yeah, that's a great one. Anyone else? Okay. Well, you guys think about it because I might roll back around to it because there's things that we can do with this song. I know. So, Suzanne, if it's okay with you, I'm going to skip a part, and so you can have more time to present your part. Are you ready for that? You're muted.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can I share my screen?
Of course. I need to get it set up on a,
Hmm. Yeah.
let
And
me,
because I have a PowerPoint, I have a Google presentation.
I might need, see if you can share it now because I might need to make you co-host.
Hmm. Okay. Can you see?
I can see now. Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay. All
And
righty.
how much time do you think you'll need?
I probably need about 10, 15 minutes. It won't be that long.
And you're going to have conversation interactive. I don't want you to feel rushed, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh,
So if
it's
we
it's
go over
okay.
time and you don't
Uh-huh.
have, I can leave some of this information off that I have to share it later.
No, no,
Yeah.
you gotta leave anything off. We're gonna be organic, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Uh-huh. Okay. Let me move this bar. See. I'm sorry. Is there a way to move the bar? The Montgomery bus boycott, December 5th, 1955 through December 20th, 1956. There comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the let me do this for a minute. Hold on. Okay. There comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. Addressed to boycott supporters, 1955. Martin Luther King. How the boycott began. The Montgomery boycott arose as a response to systematic racial segregation on buses, the oppressive Jim Crow laws, and accumulated frustration. Resistance to the system of racial segregation on public transportation can be trans can be traced back to Homer Plessy in the Plessy versus Ferguson case, 1896. In 1892, Homer Plessy planned an act of civil disobedience by refusing to move from a whites only train car. He was arrested for violating 1890 state law, the Louisiana Separate Car Act. Homer Plessy challenged the constitutionality of the law. In 1896, the Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal was constitutional, thus solidifying Jim Crow laws. So, how the past impacts the future. In 1896, the cause, 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson upheld the separate but equal doctrine. But the effect was that segregation became law across the South, even on public transportation. The cause, state used the ruling to uphold the Jim Crow laws. Um, Buses in Montgomery required blacks to sit in the back of the bus and give up their seats to white passengers. Segregation laws treated blacks as second-class citizens. Daily humiliation and unfair treatment of black bus riders increased resentment and resistance. Courts continued to uphold segregation for decades. Black riders were arrested for breaking segregation laws. Legal segregation made segregation seem lawful. Segregation remained law until legally challenged.
Mhm.
The most heroic word in all languages is resist. In 1955, Vernon Jones, the minister of Dexter Avenue Church, sat down in the whites-only section of the bus, refused to move, and was arrested. Johns encouraged others to join him. I remember seeing a movie a few years ago, it might have been about 5 to 10 years ago, where they actually focused on Vernon Jones and how he was the first to was the first to openly resist. Unfortunately, he did not have the support from the other ministers or the community that he needed. He ended up moving on and leaving the community, moving on to another area of Alabama. March 2nd, 1955, Claudette Cloven, 15, dared to sit in the whites only section of the bus and was forcibly removed from the bus. One thing about movements, I have learned from other classes and things I've taken, they were looking for the right person. If you can understand, certain people, um, they look for a certain image sometimes in order to move a movement or start a movement. Um, I think that I know with Claudette Cloven, she just did not fit who they were looking for because she was 15 and she was also said to be pregnant. So that was not a good look. So I just thought it was interesting, sometimes, that how they have to have a certain person to move to speak to strike the match of a movement. I'm not physically tired, just tired of giving in. Rosa Parks. On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks, a seamstress for a local department store, boarded a city bus heading home. The opportunity to resist presented itself. And we all know she's like, I'm not moving, I'm tired. It was it was it was just an opportunity because she had, was a participant in early discussions about challenging bus segregation. She was a very active member in the NAACP. And she was also, quote, who they were looking for because she, was motherly, middle-aged, did not seem like a threat. Vernon Johns came across a threat because he was a black male. And then you had the feisty youth, Claudine Cloven. So she was like, no, we might not get the support. But you have someone who is very peaceful, very matronly. She was who they were looking for. So, this is we hope to achieve equal rights to talk about why she got so involved. Of course, we all know the story. She was arrested, went to jail. The response, churches became the launching point for organized response. Meetings were held at Dexter Avenue Church. Black leaders formed the Montgomery Improvement Association to spearhead the Montgomery bus boycott, led by Dr. Martin Luther King. Over 200 people volunteered their cars for carpooling. There were over 100 pickup stations all around the city. Churches uh, was where donations were collected to help keep the boycott going and learn about the successes of the boycott. I think, I've heard arguments that I've read it in a book that I know of a minister who wrote this book called, I can't think of the name. You got to excuse me, it'll come to me during this presentation. But he wrote a book, and in the book, he was critical of the church being used as a launching point. It was critical of the church being used as a meeting point. I thought that was interesting. I think the church was a place that should have been used because that's where Black people really went. They went. They were very. They were. a church-going community. That's where they had their roots going back to slavery. There was no other place for them to meet. The church was theirs. There was no gym they could have met at or office room they could have rented out. That was where they met. So I thought that was interesting. That I think the book he wrote is called Black and Reformed. That's the book by Reverend Carter. I thought that was interesting, but I also thought it was interesting because neither he or I were alive during this time. This was like maybe about 12, 13 years before we were born. So I just thought that was interesting. But the churches were the place of meeting and a place of strength. The backlash. Nonviolent protest was met with systemic response. Arrest and fines. Black residents were arrested for carpooling or walking to work. I found that to be very interesting because you want to punish people because they refuse to be mistreated. So if they're walking, you don't have to worry about them taking your seats on the bus. But we'll get into what that was really about. Targeting leaders. Dr. King and other boycott leaders were arrested on charges of conspiracy. Bombings. The leaders' homes were bombed. And Dr. Martin Luther King, his home was bombed. I know that it's been written about many of his biographies or autobiographies. Also, E.D. Nixon, another leader of the bus boycott, his house was bombed. Economic retaliation. Some Black workers were threatened and even fired for supporting the boycott. Insurance cancellation. And I found this to be interesting. You learn all the time. They actually reached out to insurance companies and were canceling people's policies who they, were able to know through traffic stops were involved in the boycott. So therefore, your insurance is canceled. Can't drive your car, you possibly go to jail. Excessive ticketing of carpool drivers in an effort to discourage their participation in the boycott. There was also, a lot of blowback from the white community, even if they did not agree with having to sit with segregation. They said, you're causing an economic upheaval. And that's really what was really about. You need to ride this bus so we can make money. Doesn't matter how you treat it. I found that to be so awful. How did the boycott end? Legal challenge. Civil rights attorneys, along with the NAACP and the Montgomery Improvement Association, filed a lawsuit called Browder versus Gale, challenging the city's bus ordinances. District Court ruling June 1956 ruled that bus segregation violated the 14th Amendment clause. Supreme Court affirmation, November 1956. The Supreme Court upheld the lower court's ruling. On December 20th, 1956, an order was delivered to the Montgomery bus officials to end segregation. The tactics that caused the pillars of segregation to fall. Relentless economic pressure. This bus boycott lasted 381 days. And I mean, a lot of people walked as far as 8 miles one way because they were determined that they were going to be treated like citizens. They were determined that they were not going to accept this type of abuse. Community unity. People worked together. People were sacrificial. People um, had to build that trust that they had to agree on what their mission was. And then just the nonviolent tactics. It's very nonviolent to say, I'm not going to take the bus. I'll walk. I'll get a ride. Very nonviolent. So those were the pillars of that. Those are the tactics that caused the pillars of segregation on the Montgomery bus to fall. The Montgomery bus boycott, the civil rights era, and I'm sorry for this being in the way. The Montgomery bus boycott was successful and ushered in the civil rights era because it showed that nonviolent protest works and inspired future campaigns against segregation. So, so, um, it was so from there they went on to desegregate interstate the Greyhound buses. They used it as a way to desegregate um other facilities that were segregated. They found if we do this through nonviolence, that was the blueprint. Then and also then we can impact change. Um, they also it was inspiring and encouraging. Um, I am very inspired and encouraged. No, we cannot bring up what's happening in the present, but you can't help but say, we could look to the past to determine how we should behave in the present, you know? And I've also have read somewhere, and I absolutely agree that it's not right for anybody anywhere around the world to be oppressed. And people are not going to accept oppression because it goes against nature. So the time we're living in, we can see just all around the world. We don't have to look at the United States. We don't even have to look at the present time. You know, we could look at we could look to Europe where, they took down the Berlin Wall back in '89. We could look at different excuse me for having a brain freeze, but there are different examples around the world where people stood up and said, I'm not going to accept this. I'm going to talk about, I mean, not get into the politics, but it was funny when, not funny, when Russia invaded Ukraine back in 23. I remember my students saying, Miss Parker, Ukraine's been invaded by Russia. I mean, these children, you don't think they're paying attention. They're paying attention. And I said, yeah, I said, it's probably going to be over in a couple of days. It's been going on for 2 years. I said, okay, I underestimated them. Even though they were a smaller country, they have a strong resolve and they are still having a strong resolve. So we could look at instances around the globe. We could look at how they overthrew the dictator in Chile. The people had a strong resolve. Haiti, we go way back in history, Haiti, 1803. But and that little note talking about people's resistance. So I mean, it's not. So I use that to say that it's not. People are not going to accept being oppressed. I don't care what time period it is. But Haiti was a big deal because, um, the uh, the, uh, the opener, Toussaint Louverture, he had his people marching off a cliff. They showed their resolve because of resistance. Napoleon had to sell his land in the United States in order to keep the war going. It was so it's people resisting. So there are many places that we can look in history and see that nobody accepts being oppressed. Over getting out of oppression might take some time, like it did with the Montgomery bus boycott, because the laws were upheld, upheld, upheld. But also, I think as I read and did some reading and research yesterday, putting together the slide presentation, I thought about when Coretta Scott King was her body was being taken through the streets of Atlanta when she died back in '06. It was so important. I took my two eldest children who were 11 and 8 at the time I took them to her wake because it was a big deal in Atlanta for 3 days. I want to say I felt like it was a 3-day wake, and I took my children there just so that they will remember who this woman was. If they didn't understand it, they remember they walked past her casket. But I remember the news reporters saying, people think that history is linear. But they said, no, history is cyclical, spiral. It could repeat itself if we're not careful. So I thought about that. Um, but also we look to history to inspire us because, and also Homer Plessy, I meant to put a picture of Homer Plessy up. Homer Plessy was really, in my opinion, Homer Plessy is a white man. I mean, he was 7/8 European, 1/8 African. Well, I did my math. 1/8 African comes out to 12.5% black. That's not, to me, that's not black. And he passed for a white man. And he could have, sat in a white section. But he deliberately told them, I'm a black man. And he sat in a white section. So that was deliberate, pre-planned resistance. Um, Even though he was not successful, they were able to look to the past to have something to fight about. Because he did that, um, it further cemented Jim Crow. So what he did, that past, like I showed the slide, impacted the future. Okay, so I'm very inspired because I get in conversation sometimes with a coworker. We talk politics. We talk about what's going on and just how people don't seem to care, like how you cannot care about your fellow man, especially if you're one of the marginalized groups. Okay, just leave it there. I know we're not supposed to go there, but you can't help it sometimes. And she said, "Well, I tell you, they just don't care. That's how they're thinking. I'm telling you, that's what they're doing." And my thought process is, yeah, I know they don't care, but I believe that we can change them, being that folks don't care about what happens to people that look like them because I'm good, does not mean that we cannot believe in change and believe that even those who are hard-hearted can be changed and can be pulled into impacting change for others. I don't accept. I mean, I understand they just don't care. You have to understand their mindset. I agree, but I also agree and that things can be restored. So, looking at Plessy, Homer Plessy versus Ferguson, related to the Montgomery bus boycott, relating it to the civil rights era. Um, One thing that I have learned and I think about is how we can never get comfortable thinking, okay, we've done this. This is history. We're going to keep moving forward. I always thought that people matured and got better because of where we've been, but I'm understanding no, that's not the case. When I think about segregation, and I saw telling my husband the other day, I said, Gary, because both of us were born in 68. So we remember 1975, 76 being in school. I told him, I said, this memory is still with me, and I remember the teacher's name. I had to be about 8 going on 9. I want to say it was 1977. I said, Gary, we had no idea of the the Selma March. We had no idea about March on Washington. We had no idea about any of that. And I said, that was just right when we were born, right there. So anyway, I remember a movie we saw in 1977, and we used to have assemblies. We also had an auditorium, and it was showing the not only the bus boycott, but it was also showing Black people being hosed and beaten and the dogs, and we all sat there. This happened, I want to say 1963. 64, so we're talking about maybe about 14 years. I will always remember the teacher, her name. I remember her. We were in this narrow staircase going up back up to the class, and she was so angry, and she was fussing at my teacher, saying, "How dare they show that? How dare they show that?" And I'm standing there at 8, going on 9. How dare I remember her just being? I see her to this day, and how dare they show that? And I'm thinking to myself, what was wrong? That was a movie that happened. You know, and the next year, I promise you, the next year, 1978, we saw a cartoon. We didn't see the video, we saw a cartoon. But I said, Gary, I had no idea where we were. And he agreed with me, because he and her husband and I are the same age. I said, we had no idea where we were in history. We had no idea what a big deal it was in 1986 that Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday to You, Martin Luther King song was. We just had no idea. Because you don't understand history, because we're actually um, really still in it. So when I think about slavery, because everything is connected. So since I can't go to the forward, I got to go back. Slavery in America did not start off where, okay, you're going to be slaves. It was, we brought y'all here. We kidnapped you, Angolans, from this ship. We brought you here. As long as you become Christian, you can be free. And it was like that. And you ever studied slavery in the 16th century in Virginia, those black people had land, but they lost their rights one law at a time. So by the 1700s, early 1700s, slavery was in full effect. So why do I mention that? Because things don't happen overnight. Loss of freedom, injustice doesn't happen overnight. It happens one law at a time. It happens very subtly, just like it was two white indentured servants, and a black man named John Punch that ran away, and they were captured. So the white indentured servants got just a few extra years. John Punch, they said, any child born to a black woman will be forever a slave. So the treatment was different. See, it happened little by little, very subtly, and it happens in vacuums like we're in now. I think people are coming around. I do, but well, I'm not Hispanic, that's not my problem. Or I'm Hispanic, I came here the right way, so that's not going to touch me. Well, I'm Black, I'm not Hispanic, I'm not Somali, that's not going to impact me. And that's where people have to understand, as Martin Luther King said, threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So, people cannot live in this vacuum because we all are impacted, we all are connected one way or another. So, that is my presentation for today.
Thank you, Suzanne. I knew we were going to get a lot of history, and I really, really appreciate it. You're just
hmm
loaded. I know you stopped and there's more, but yeah, thank you so much.
hmm
Really appreciate it. There's a couple of things that I heard you say. I'm sorry, I was thinking about when you were talking about the church, and this is one thing that I remember is that in conjunction with what you said too,
hmm
the church was where people went all the time. They didn't just go when it was time for
mm
that to prepare for the Montgomery bus boycott. They were there
mm
Sunday after Sunday, but not just one time on Sunday, though. The
Right.
churches were doors were open Sunday morning, Sunday school, 11 o'clock service, 3 o'clock service, and evening service. It was
hmm
open all day long on Sunday. I remember
hmm
that as a kid. I got it was a lot of church on a Sunday. It was a lot
Yes,
of church.
yes,
Yeah, but
yes,
you know what? They if they had food, I was good to go, and they always
yes.
had food, so that that just
uh,
helped me keep it balanced. But this is the reason I say that because if you know anything about the African American church back then, and even some churches today too, whatever is going on in the world, we know. We don't even have to ask a question. It's going to affect African Americans. Bottom line, it's going to affect us. And so the conversations were already being had. So the people did not have a lot of preparation to do to get ready for the Montgomery bus boycott, except be called together. There was some training that Rosa Parks took early in the summer in preparation for that, but it was kept quiet. And so when it was time to call people together, it was not like, oh my gosh, did you contact Melissa? Does she know? Oh yeah, Melissa was already well informed because she was at church all day long too. And so all you had to do is make sure that everybody remembered to go, not that they weren't informed. And I really liked that part of it. And it was talked about. I've said this every single time we have a meeting, basically. These kinds of issues were always talked about in the church, in the school, in the community. And who's there? Everybody that lives there. Because my teachers were at my church. They were friends of my parents. So everybody knew everybody. And the conversation was ongoing. And it wasn't through a phone because everybody didn't have a phone. People talked, or they would go to your house and remind you. So yeah.
You know, uh, that's true. I mean, like I said, I came up a little bit after that era, I did, but I do remember growing up in church, and you're right. And because the people the adults who I was raised around were of that generation, and they were from the South. I grew up in New York City. So church, I remember having church come and visit. I remember, I did, plus they had an after school program. So we were in church every day. Church was open every day.
Yeah.
And then we had choir rehearsal things on Saturday and then meetings. So church, because church was central for that generation, I grew up with a church being open every day. Um, I want to say that it's funny, but things kind of carry on now. I would say maybe it was back in the election of President Obama. You never know about children and how they're listening. Now my school demographics, because the district has changed, Atlanta, it's becoming more mixed. But for the first, I said I've been there from '96 to now. So I would say, well, even back in 2008, it was still predominantly Black. So I remember a student saying to me, he said, I hear you teachers. He was very inquisitive. He said, I hear you teachers talking in the hallways to each other. I kind of hear, he said, y'all talking low, but we hear y'all. And they were being inspired by what they heard about us talking about voting and about President Obama. I didn't realize that they were listening, but they were sitting there being encouraged. So I'm saying that's how messages carry. I think it's interesting even now. No, we're not talking about what's going on, but I do feel this is interesting. It might be a little bit of social media, but people have talked about how Black people, with all that's going on, have not been in the streets. They're not in the streets. Why are they in the streets? And it's a quiet understanding. And I don't know. I know I feel this way. People I work with, my friends, all this feel this way, but it's not like we sat down and had a conversation. across the nation. It's like we understand it's not our time to become involved. It's we need to be aware. So my colleague says to me, who works next door to me, "So Parker, what's the news now? What's going on now?" And I'll share her what's, what the Supreme Court said. This what was filed. This is what was stayed. She said, okay, I just, it's that talk. But we all understand. I think it's interesting because nobody told us or nobody had a public service announcement saying, "Hey, y'all don't get involved." It was just like this quiet understanding that it's not our season to be involved, but we are watching and we do care.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the thing about African Americans too is that we are always prepared because we've
Mm-hmm.
had to be
Mm-hmm.
prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're not there, when we're behind the scenes, we are still talking among ourselves though.
Yes,
And with the
yes.
organization among us never ceases.
Right.
It's part of that resiliency that goes all the way back to slavery, and it's like part of who we are today. It's always there. But also, if you know anything about slavery, we were also taught, my people were also taught not to
Mm-hmm.
share everything
Right.
because it
Right.
wasn't safe.
Right.
It didn't say don't prepare, it just said don't
Those.
share.
And
And so,
yes, like Whoopi Goldberg, and I think about that now when things are happening. No, we cannot discuss. It's hard, Miss Evelyn, not to discuss what's going on because it's all kind of tied with this. But Whoopi Goldberg said not everything happens in the media.
yeah.
There are a lot of things. There are a lot of things that are going on now in the government. They're happening. There are good things are happening behind the scenes, And like Texas Paul said, he said it's not about the people. I was listening to a video last week. It's not about the people who are like in front of the cameras that we see all the time. It's people that are quiet, that are
Mhm.
moving and shaking things in the halls that are having a positive impact. So yeah, we have to remember that not everything happens in front of the camera, nor does it need to. Nor does it need to. I think it's very interesting. We go back to slavery to now how you have I remember one lady who I'm in disagreement with, but you live, you love, and you move on. I'm in disagreement with, and she had, posted some things that really are just not I should say are not helpful to the community. And she was arguing that one thing she did say as I was putting together this thing as I was thinking about her, she said, Black people, we're not a monolith. We're not a monolith. So we're very, we have very, very different ideas. So I wonder, I think we were more a monolith in the past than we are now. I think that my generation who are born, who are, we are we have inherited the civil rights, uh, we inherited the progress, the gifts of the civil rights movement. We are inherited. I think that we have become, more different because we think that we don't need that unity anymore. But I will say that I do find it interesting. I had to get past anger and all that. I had to just come back to a place of love that people who look like me, who are in my age group, will go against what's good for us. I mean, big time. But then come back and still sit in our community and be with us and breaking bread with us. And I'm like, well, you voted against things that are going to hurt us, but yet you still need our community. We have to relearn or have to understand ourselves better. I do say that. So I thought about the fact that the Montgomery bus boycott had far more unity and understanding, I think, than if my generation had to do it now. It's just not, we have become too fragmented, and the generation behind us has become fragmented. But I also think about when in the bus, all this relates to Montgomery bus boycott, people didn't want to lose their jobs. And sometimes if you and I were cousins and you were involved in the boycott, and both us teachers, they fired both of us. They fired whole families who were working for the school system, to make a point. But I will share this and then I'm going to be quiet because I mean, we go on and on and on. I was in church this morning and the minister was talking about joy, joy. And he said, they try to figure out how they take our jobs, take everything from us, but we still have joy because joy gives you hope. joy keeps you together. And as I thought about the presentation, Montgomery bus boycott, and all that they lived through, they had the singing that goes back to the singing.
Yeah.
And how can the singing help in rallies? Because it helps, even though you might be fearful, that joy is stabilizing, it's encouraging. So his sermon tied in, tied into this presentation, tied into the song about joy. I think about, and I'll share this. I said, this is it, but she gave me the time. I was, when they're talking about, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, podcasters. And I said, oh my gosh, she's right. It's about 2 months ago because he talked about strength. He said, okay. He said they tore down the plaza in DC. He said, he mentioned something else that happened, and he said they lynched one of us in Mississippi. It did happen recently, a college student. He said, but even that, we're not riled. I was like, you know what? He's right. I said, we did have a lynching. We did have the plaza in DC tore up. A lot of us have lost our jobs. A lot of things have happened. They said, but yet we're still calm. And I said, you know what? We are. I said, so we have to, even if we don't talk about it, it's somewhere in our DNA, the strength of the past, the
It is.
ancestors, the joy, the organizing in our minds, in our hearts. So I think that, and I'm gonna end with this, and I'm gonna say it. I believe that there is better to come. I believe in healing. I believe that America is going to have brighter days, and I'm encouraged because of the past. I'm encouraged because of scripture and Joel. I'm sorry, it's Sunday. Joel says, he said, guys, I'm going to give you back what the locust stole from you, what the lost year stole from you. So even though things may be looking bleak and things are looking really bonkers, looking at the Montgomery bus boycott, looking at scripture, looking at all the positive energy that's around, it's going to be okay. In 2030s, I believe it's going to be a time of rebuilding. 2030s, 2040s. I'm going to be there. I won't even be 70, so I'll be there.
Thank you, Suzanne. So Suzanne
Uh-huh.
and I have been doing a lot of talking. We will not leave you guys out of the conversation. This has been powerful. I love it because it is part of my history, and my mind is going all the way back to just like when I was a kid and the richness of it. But I have often said too, that's my foundation. And like you said, Suzanne, I am not shaken by this stuff. I can't, I mean, I see rattling happening around me, but I am not shaken. For me personally, I say this is like, it's the same book. And maybe we're in chapter, it's a big, thick book. Maybe we're in chapter 35. And you said earlier, the wheel is turning. Nothing's really changed that much. You have different people within those power positions, but the pillars topple. They topple. And one thing I can say about the Montgomery bus boycott, 381 days, it has not been repeated yet. No one, no other organization has done that yet. We have actually, we're doing things today to where we're boycotting this particular business and that one, but we haven't gotten to 381 days yet. Hopefully we do, because there's some that need that kind of intensity, but we've not gotten there yet. Another thing I want to do, I want to share just a little bit about Mahalia. Oh, I'm sorry, I won't go there yet. I want to have conversation from our friends over here. It's just not you and me, Suzanne. I feel like we're kind of like we use our voices a little bit here, heavy. So I know there are other folks who have information to share about the Montgomery bus boycott, or maybe your experiences with understanding where African Americans are in the movement today, or whatever's on your mind, but not about the opposition. So talk to us. Come on, people. What you got to say? How much do you guys know about the Montgomery bus boycott? Or any, okay, John.
When Suzanne talked about Rosa Parks being selected as the right person, I remember I read a little bit in prep for this, that they said Dr. King was selected as the right person because he was new in town and young and didn't have a lot of network enemies, nor like tied into specific friends, that he was chosen for that reason. And that was a surprise to me.
Anybody else? Thank you, John.
I think I had also, not just for this event, but for previous things that I've been part of, I think that that was one of the things that um, had surprised me too, was that the strategy that was very apparent, that it was like we need the right people to do this for the right, in order to make the most of the movement. And yeah, and I think that there, for me personally, it's I'm thankful for like this organization and other organizations that I've been part of, and just my own, like, trying to unlearn what I learned as a kid growing up in Indiana,
Mhm.
which is so, when I hear things, well, even like when Suzanne said, she was talking to you were talking to a colleague, and you couldn't, your colleague couldn't understand like why somebody was showing up and voting in ways that were contraindicated for like the betterment of everything. And I think that too is a common theme of people who aren't happy with what's going on, because I think all of us can see that in varying degrees. And I think it's good. I think it's good to acknowledge that, and notice that these that folks that aren't there yet, that are still buying into some of the rhetoric that isn't good for anybody, um, that those folks are just people like us, and when I encounter folks like that, um, and I did it this week. There's kind of this surprise, because I want to believe that uh, folks that are aligned with the rhetoric that's going on are one stereotype in my own head, and that doesn't exist either. It's like, and so I think that we do have to have an open enough mind that we can have conversations with people, um, just to learn more about each other. So like events like this are a good reminder that um, talking is important.
Mhm. Thank you, Melissa. Kenneth.
Yes, there one of the things I saw earlier this week about the history of this boycott was some of the things that happened prior to this. Um, and one of them that was a black U.S. Army uniformed soldier, Thomas Edward Brooks, who in August of 1950 refused to exit a bus in Montgomery and re-enter through the rear door. And a police officer entered the bus and ordered him to exit the bus. The officer clubbed him over the head, started dragging him to the door, and this Mr. Brooks broke free and ran off the bus. The officer shot him in the back and killed him. And the authorities at the time tried to say, oh, it was self defense, even though he had shot him in the back. And Rosa Parks herself had been kicked off the bus by this exact same bus driver about 10 years previously, and been kicked off other buses. And so there's a tendency with that I have, and I think we all have, of hindsight bias, that we think, well, this was kind of we have want to believe in the ultimate justice of our systems of, we call them justice, but it wasn't at all a foregone conclusion that the outcome was going to be as we've seen it now. I had the opportunity a few years ago to spend a few days in Montgomery and tour some of the museums there. And Please take my memories with a grain of salt because they're fallible and I may be misremembering some things. But there was right now it's a kind of a vacant lot where they've set up an arch over the building where Rosa Parks used to work. And my recollection of it was that I think she was a seamstress there. And there were white seamstresses sewing there, and Rosa Parks was one of the black seamstresses. And the white seamstresses, if I remember correctly, got to work on the top floor, and they had windows, which gave them more ventilation. I think they could open the windows, gave them a view outside. And Rosa Parks and the black women were confined to the basement. So even there, segregation was apart, and they didn't have the windows, they didn't have the ventilation. And so everything about her life was just this constant, just a difficult way to live. And one of the things about the boycott, it started very, very moderately. And what I mean by that, they weren't demanding the end of segregation at all. There was another southern city, I don't recall. I was tempted to say which one it was. I don't recall for sure, but it was in the far deep south, maybe New Orleans or someplace like that in the very deep south, where they had already put in place the very things that the protesters in Montgomery were requesting. And they were requesting just very basic dignity. That's it. They were just requesting just to be treated like people. And the practice was, and that's what got Mr. Brooks shot in the back, was that they had to enter the front of the bus and pay their fare, and then they had to go right back out the door and walk around to the back door and get in the bus back there. And the black women on the call can address this much better than I can, but it was required that black people, black women have their hair like white women. So they had to go through a lot of problems and a lot of time and effort to fix their hair. So if it happened to be raining and they would come up, maybe if they were fortunate and had an umbrella or whatever they had, they would have to close their umbrella, get on the front bus, pay their fare, get off, open their umbrella, and try to get to the back. And if it's raining hard and their hair gets wet, then it just doesn't stay straight. And again, the black women could address that better than I can. But it was just that kind of cruelty. And one of the things that an occasional mean bus driver would do is when they would pay their fare, get off, the bus driver would drive off and leave them there. And especially if it was in the rain. So they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have an easy way to call for help and just leave them standing there. They already paid their fares. Were trying to get to work, couldn't get to work on time. It would be risk getting fired because they were going to be late for work. And all they were asking was just treat us like they're treating us in this other majority black city further south. And don't abuse us this way. But they couldn't stand it. And it had been that way for several years in this other further city to the further south. And it hadn't damaged segregation. It hadn't been horrible. They had just been treated a little more human. That was it. Just a little more human.
You know what? I wanted to say, if you don't mind, when you talked about the hair, you talked about a little further south. I was thinking about take taking lemons and making lemonade. There's something called, you can look it up, called the Tagon laws, and they were passed, I would say mid 18th century, and talk about hair and how black women who oftentimes in that area were mixed, mixed Indian, European, Black, African. They were enslaved though. They couldn't have their hair out. So what they did was they had to tie their hair up. And that's how they started to make beautiful head wraps. Because that was they said, okay, we can't have our hair out, so we put it in head because they were accusing them the white women were accusing these women of luring their husbands. And so therefore they did that. Then I read also like in the Dominican Republic, they couldn't wear shoes. They had this thing about them wearing shoes, so they made beautiful sandals. There's always a way to, get around the oppression, and that's to me that joy that minister was talking about this morning. They took what was oppressive, and made it into something greater. I just I didn't realize that about the having to get off and go back to the back of the bus. But one thing I do say when we look at segregation, and again, I'm very mindful, Miss Evelyn, don't talk about what's going on now. When we look at segregation and look at the horrible racism like Kent was just talking about, I often say I don't think they understood how could I say it? I don't, and you might correct me, Miss Evelyn, I don't really hold them, I kind of say responsible, kind of say this, because they didn't know what they were doing was wrong. This is the way life was. Like Woodrow Wilson, he showed it was this real racist the name of the movie's on the tip of my tongue. It was a real racist movie. He showed in the White House. And it was about black men attacking white women. It was real racist. But he was a man of his time. uh, President McKinley, a cadre of black people went up to McKinley in Washington, D.C. and said, please pass laws because they are lynching our people. Lynching was very high in the 1890s. They said, please, you got to pass some legislation. McKinley said, no, I'm not interested. And later on, he was assassinated. Not because of that, but some crazy person assassinated President McKinley. My point is, these men were men of Birth of a Nation. Thank you. My husband told me Birth of a Nation. Thank you, Gary. Um, um, I consider them to be men of their times. You understand? Like the bus driver, the police officer. Yes, it was wrong, but maybe they didn't know better. When I compare the cruelty that's going on now and all this intentional effort to roll back time 70 years, my thing is, you know better. You know better. But maybe all that happened through slavery, through Jim Crow, through what you're talking about, people didn't know any better. They thought this was the way it should be. What is your thoughts on that?
Are you asking me or Kenneth?
Whoever
Yeah,
wants to.
yeah, I cannot acquiesce to the fact that they didn't know better. I think they did. I think it's because that's the way the nation was designed to function. I
Okay.
have this book on my shelf, but I think it's by Abraham X. Kendi, Marked
Mm-hmm.
from the Beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all structured that way. When they saw
Okay.
the strength of the black men specifically, and how they
Mm-hmm.
could abuse the black women more intentionally for their own good.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, if it was not from the beginning, they had an opportunity to stop.
Mm-hmm.
There were enough people who were involved in the enslavement of black people if they had chosen to, and some of them did, a very
Mm-hmm.
few. They had the opportunity to stop, but for generations, for years, hundreds of years, and nobody said this is wrong. No, I cannot believe
Okay.
that they were not aware. It's just
Okay.
like, and I'll go back to what Kendra said about the hair. I completely agree with that. I was
Mm-hmm.
100% aware of that. And it was just maybe less than 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia when the governor signed into law the
The
hair
Crown,
thing.
the Crown Act.
The Crown
The
Act,
Crown Act.
just this is
Yes.
2025.
Uh-huh.
So it's still going on. But
Mm-hmm.
he's made history for us.
Yes.
And you know what? He received a little bit of pushback on that too.
Uh-huh.
But I appreciate that. Yeah, I remember having to wear when I was a kid, we called them head rags.
Uh-huh.
Or a head rag. There are some places you didn't go in public without having your head covered because it was
Mm-hmm.
offensive to the white women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You remember that.
I
Oh,
remember I
wow.
was part of that. And that's
Wow.
that's my era. I don't remember ever getting on a city bus except one time. I
Mm-hmm.
was when I was a kid, I was playing outside and something happened, and I could only turn my head like this. I couldn't move it back to the front. That was the only time in my life as a kid that I went to the doctor with my mom. And I remember having to get on the city bus through the back door.
Wow.
My mother, I remember my mother, because I'm not very tall right now, but I was really short. I remember my mom was like 5'9". I remember my mom lifted me up to the back of the bus. I don't remember having to go to the front though. Maybe she did and I didn't have to. I don't remember that part. But I do exactly what Kenneth said though about going and getting off and then going and being left. I know that story.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this though, as far as the bus is concerned, because we always lived, when I was a kid, we always lived in the countryside. And when the schools were integrated in 1965, I think it was, and blacks and whites were going to school together, I do remember sitting on the back of the school bus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what else is so interesting? We were talking about, just moving forward and talking about movement. Most black people, I know my uncle, he had Cadillacs. As a little girl growing up in the 70s. He had Cadillacs. Most black people had Cadillacs. I remember my daddy had a Dodge Plymouth. I remember that because I consider myself really be a child of the 70s, born in 68, so I'm a child of the 70s. And I learned recently from women at my school who were in their 70s, their parents, they were talking about, black people saved Cadillac. They saved the Cadillac industry because they said we could only buy cars from Plymouth and Cadillac. They said they were the only car dealerships that would sell to us. All the others would not sell to us.
Yeah.
And I had to stop and think about it. I was like, yes, my uncle had always bought Cadillacs. We always saw black Cadillac. I always saw Cadillacs in our communities. And my dad had always had Plymouths when I was a little girl. And I
Yeah.
think
And
that
this
is
is, I remember
interesting.
that conversation too when I was a kid,
It's
having that
interesting.
conversation because we always called them those big cars, those big long
Yes,
cars.
boats. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but we call them the hearse cars though, because if
Uh-huh.
you guys know anything about an ambulance or when someone dies, you go to the body's taken to the church
Mhm.
in a hearse.
Hearse.
We call it a hearse. So and those other big cars were always part of that, that the movement of the hearse. There was always a big
Mhm.
car, and so
Mhm.
we call them the hearse cars, and they were a little bit intimidating, a little bit scary. Because I'm
Mhm.
thinking, if we get in those cars, we're gonna die. That's just what I
Those
said.
cars are
Yeah,
huge. So I just
yeah.
think that's just very, I think about, that's the reason why I'm so encouraged by by the boycott and by what's going on now. Is because I'm thinking from an African American standpoint, is that there's always been a way made for us.
Mhm.
And we never, like the minister talked this morning about joy. There's a video on YouTube, and you can probably look it up. I thought that was so interesting. I was just sat there and watched it. They said, why were blacks so slim in the 1970s? I had to watch that. And they said because they were always on the move. They always played. They were always outside. They were into sports. Gym was a big deal in the 1970s. And they talked about roller skating. They talked about taking the bus or walking. And they were saying, so that's why they were in such good shape. I said that is very wild, but very true. So I think all of us can be encouraged, and I think that all of us can learn from the past. The past is nothing to be ashamed of. I think we can learn from the mistakes and learn that some of the fears that people have in present day United States is unfounded. Um, and we have to start to have my biggest thing is that I'm going to be quiet because I know I'm not supposed to go off in territory. But my biggest thing is thinking about, moving forward. We have to have a positive vision that everybody can buy into. That's my thought right now. A positive vision that we can work towards as a multicultural society that everybody can say, yeah, that's what kind of world I want to build going forward in the 30s and the 40s. And if I think about it, I think I mentioned this book to you, Miss Evelyn, and I'm gonna have to rake my brain. I might have wrote it down somewhere. It's a book called The Fourth Turning. That's what it's called, The Fourth Turning. I'm gonna have to buy it, but I read excerpts. I saw it on TV. No, on YouTube. Fourth Turning talks about how there is calamity, there's healing, then people start to question. I forget what the third turning is. It's like it repeats. So like right now we're in the calamity. So after calamity comes the rebuilding and the healing. Then after that, probably in the 2050s, the healing will be 2030s, 2040s, those 2 decades. It lasts about 20 years. And then the 2050s, people start to do what they did in the 70s and 80s, start to question and challenge. Then it leads to a breakdown again than calamity. And I was like, wow. And I was sharing that with an educator, and he said, the reason this keeps happening, he's a young man, he said, probably because we're not learning from it. But they said
Mm.
if you look through at history, the fourth turning, right now we're in the fourth turning. It happens, the calamity. They say after calamity, there's hope, rebuilding, new ideas. And I just think that's interesting. And they said it lastly where each turning point lasts at least 20 years. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, thank you for that. So
Uh-huh.
I know we've talked a lot again. How about Christine? Do you have any comments or
Hmm.
Andrea and Casey? If you want to put something in the chat, girl, go for it because I know you still can't unmute yourself, and I know you have something to say.
Uh,
So please do. And Lena, Christine, take it away.
yes, I'm in a book club on nonviolence, and we're reading Martin Luther King's Stride Toward Freedom. And one of the things that I found really interesting is how integral women were in starting the boycott and keeping it going. And I just thought that was really interesting. And sometimes, you know, not enough credit is given where credit is due.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I really appreciate that too. And I think about, not to sound like, yay, we did it. But I guess we did. I think about the last election, with the African American women being the 91%. And then we're sitting out of the rallies now. So we've always been there. We've always been there, and I'm motivated by that. I'm encouraged by that. And yet I know there are times when we just have to take a break. We just have to rest. But the stamina for us, the resiliency has always been there because yeah, African American women's have always been in the forefront. It's just where we have not necessarily because we want to, but because we've had to. The men were in the fields working, and the women were in the big house, we really kind of learning and keeping that leadership and taking care of our children and their children. And yeah, Lena, you had a comment.
Yes, I was born in 77. My daddy had an Eldorado. It was like golden. And we also had a Plymouth. Um, we had a family, my mom and dad, and it was 4 children. So it was family six. So even at that time, that was still considered like a big family.
Hmm.
I remember my mom just always being angry. And like again, the more and more I learn about the past, I'm assuming that's why she was so angry. But yeah, there was always certain topics that she just did not want to talk about.
Hmm.
And again, around that 65, I think it was 70. Well, I guess it could have been 65 because she graduated in 73. And she was the group of first Black students to integrate the high school that she graduated from. And
Hmm.
again, only a few stories she shared with us, but yeah, nothing positive,
Hmm.
nothing good, nothing positive. Um, to bring it full circle, even to myself or people my age, I feel
Hmm.
like it's really like a 50-50. People are paying attention or they completely are not. They're still not. Like they don't care. They're not thinking about it, they're not talking about it. Unfortunately still, when I do go out to groups or if I am attending something, a lot of times I am the only African American person in the room. Um, and so like again, that is disheartening, but the resilience that I have, I keep on showing up, I keep on talking, I keep on listening, I keep on learning. So hopefully others will do the same as well. But I feel like yeah, when we stop talking and we stop wanting to learn new things, we are in a big trouble. So I
Hmm.
really do consider myself a life learner and I try to purposely get into places or ask those questions and find, I want to hear for myself so I can make an educated decision for myself.
Hmm. Hmm.
And again, whatever I reflect down to my children, I want them to do the same thing. Ask questions. It's always okay. Ask questions. You may not get an answer today. You may not get an answer tomorrow, but always keep that curiosity in your mind and in your heart. And just remember where you come from. Because, like, again, When you think about how many people were taken from Africa and brought over here, I know for a fact my ancestors, they made the journey. They survived the journey. They made it through slavery. And that child begat my mom. That child begat my dad. So like again, I know it was some horrendous things happening, but just to know that my ancestors survived through the voyage, through slavery, and they were still here in this, in Virginia, still taking, still working, still and being activists. Or like I'm finding out that my grandma was an activist. I think my mom was like very anti-activist. And like again, she would look at me. I think I shared this with you, Evan, that you must have got that from your grandma. Because it skipped over me kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was like, I must have because I just feel it like a burning in my soul that I have to. God to do something. So no matter what I do, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability and try to educate a few people along the way.
Thank you, Lena. What I'd like to do now, I'm going to skip over part of this because we've had great conversation. And there's one more thing I want to share with you guys. Then we'll have a little bit more conversation. And that is, we're going to go back to the African American church where we were. I just remember as a kid, as a teenager, adult, being just inundated with scripture from the Bible. All of the scripture is connected to how we are to live, how we are to endure. And so when we look at the situations around us, it's not like, oh my gosh, what can I do? We were always taught to look back. Like Lena is saying, all that begetting. We were always taught to look back and say, well, how did they overcome? We sing, we shall overcome. We shall overcome, which means we have not yet. It's ongoing, but how did they overcome? And so I want to share this song. I want you guys to listen to this song. And I think this is the one that's pretty loaded with scripture. If you don't, you might not be familiar with what the songs or what the scriptures are, but just listen. And then if you want to ask me, I can tell you more about it, or Suzanne can too. But this is how I grew up living. It was not like, Evelyn and her family are going to do this and maybe they'll get through it. It was never that. Never that. It was, we will get through it by the power of God. I will remember it was always a conversation. So I've never been without that hope. I've been frustrated for sure, but I've never been without the hope. Because I have always been able to look back and say, oh my gosh, my mom came over this, my grandparents came through that, and it's almost like they're my pillars of strength because I saw what the possibilities are because of our faith. So if you guys don't mind, listen to this song, then we'll talk. Does that one say old time religion? Because I want to make sure it's the right one. Does it say old time religion? Yes? Okay. You guys done? Everybody's done? Okay, so I don't want to rush you if you're not done. Are you finished? All right. So I'm not sure exactly what you guys understood about what's going on there, but when he talked about Paul and Silas, this is in the New Testament of the Bible, and this is what I was taught in the church. I mean, it was like rhetorical. If it worked for them, it will work for us. When I say it goes way back, it goes way back. And then Daniel was thrown in the lion's den. You guys probably know the story about that. And God was with him in the lion's den. The lion's den for us was slavery or any other kind of oppressive action that was imposed upon us. If it worked for them then, if he lifted them, if he walked with them, this is what I was taught. He will do the same for us. No fear can bind. And then Suzanne, you said a few minutes ago, his joy, you were talking about joy. And this song, I heard that growing up all the time. His joy is free. We can either be fearful or we can be joyful. And so, what I thought about when I heard this song was all the rhetoric that we hear today. We often say the opposition, they're really good messengers. They repeat, repeat, repeat. Why don't we? And when I was growing up, this was repeated, repeated, repeated. Remember now, I'm in church from Sunday school starts at 9 o'clock. And if it's 3 o'clock service in the afternoon, it will probably end about 4:30. We'll go home and have dinner and come back about 6:30. So I hear the same thing every single, and not only that, we had church on Wednesday nights too. We didn't have sports activities on Wednesdays when I was growing up. It just didn't happen. So I was inundated with all of this biblical knowledge. When I say it's my foundation, that's my foundation. It's what I hear. It's what I think about. It's what I go to when I see the struggle today. And I'm thinking, okay, so we've already come through. We're going through, but we've already come through. Am I to doubt that we can't go through it again? It's the same God. So when I say that there's it's intertwined, the civil rights era, the Montgomery bus boycott, the church, gospel music is all intertwined. That's what I mean by that. That's my experience as part of my story. That's my foundation. Is how I make it. So I want to know what you guys heard.
Well, I remember what I was going to say last time. There was a very good program that they put on PBS, and they were talking about women in the Black church, and they even they did a good spectrum, and also how music was instrumental throughout all the years. Me personally, my pastor's sermon today was called "The Privilege of Poverty." The privilege of poverty. Because, like again, if somebody said, "Oh yeah, I'm blessed because I have this job. I'm blessed if I have that car. I'm blessed because I have this house." Anything can happen to your car. Anything can happen to your house. Anything can happen to you. But if you have that joy in your heart, that can never be taken away. So again, be very careful of what you are putting your emphasis on, or your main focus, or anything like that. Again, to piggyback what you said, Miss Evelyn, that again, yes, if you learn this and you hear it repeatedly and you believe it, yeah, I can look at people and be like, okay, why are they all broken to pieces? You're still breathing. You still woke up this morning. You still are able to talk. I can't walk on my own. I can't, clean up after myself after the bathroom, but I can still do so many other things. So it's really about like that perspective. And one of the main things that my pastor did reiterate to the congregation today is that if you're poor and you believe in God, God is your everything. So again, if that's your focus, if that's what you are reminding yourself day in and day out, it's very hard for somebody to discourage you or knock you down for too long. Because again, a song is going to pop back in your head, memory is going to pop back in your head. Be like, hey, I did make it through that, and I am here today. So, like again, if he did it for me then, why won't he do it again? Kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
like again, that he's not out to punish people. He's not out to punish people. He wants you to know how much he loves you. And so, like again, that was in the song that that people need to know that you love them and that it's still the same back then as it is today. Yeah. Definitely hope. Yes, I agree with you, Tiffany.
Thank you. Anyone else? What did you guys hear?
Um, I heard just to continue pushing forward, continue to keep the faith. I had to say, Lena said a mouthful, and she's such an inspiration. She said a mouthful. And I love what you said. Um, yeah, so that's what I heard. Continue to keep the faith, move forward. Um, and I have to say that I share that with my daughter a lot. She's finishing up her finals. It's her last year of college. So, she's all nervous. And I told her, I said, you know what? This too shall pass. You don't get caught up in that. This too shall pass. I said, he knows the plans and hopes he has for your life. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. So don't get hung up on this, this C that you don't like. You don't even know if you got the C yet. But even if you do, you have so much ahead of you that this is, I don't want to minimize it, but this is nothing. As long as you know you've done your best. So I found to be very encouraging,
Yeah.
strengthening. hmm
Anybody else?
Yeah.
This was probably new to a lot of you guys. I recognize that. I understand that. Yeah. Kenneth, you off mute. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to ask your permission to post a link to a version of We Shall Overcome is one thing, but I was also going to offer that when I was in Montgomery, I had the opportunity to visit the Legacy Museum, and my comments about that will be based on a conversation I had with a Black woman who was a receptionist at Rosa Parks Museum. I was waiting for the presentation to start in the best setup they have there and was talking to her and asked her if she had visited the Legacy Museum. And she had said, I don't know if my heart could stand it. And I understand that. So my comments are informed by her reaction. And that is that I would highly, highly recommend if pale people like me are in the Montgomery area and could spend a day or two, and you could spend 2 days there, I did easily. It would be very profitable for you. And I want to also thank the Black women on the call for your steadfastness in defending democracy for our country. But before I would encourage Black people to consider the warning of the Black lady I talked to before you attend the museum. It's owned by Black people, it's run by Black people. As far as I saw, everyone working there are Black people, but it's designed to educate pale people like me. I think it would be, like she said, I think it would be very traumatic for Black people to go. I mean, if you really, really, really want to, just please be advised that it is really designed, it's a punch in the gut, and it would just be really tough.
It's
Yeah,
the
thank you, Kenneth. I'm
lynching.
glad it's there because it can't be erased.
Yeah, the lynching museum. I call it the Legacy Lynching Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's always called Lynching Museum. We saw when it came through on 2001. It was the Without Sanctuary, which dealt with lynching. No, I have not been there. I agree with him. You really have to get your mind right. But I'm very aware of it because I looked at Without Sanctuary when they did the history of lynching and they brought to Atlanta in 2001. Yeah, again, I think that we do need to be educated, everybody, and I don't like that term pale people. I say people of European descent because that's who they are. They're people of European descent. They're European Americans. Because it's not blaming like this is what you did, but it's this is what a segment of society did, and what can we do so it won't happen again? And I think that's the part that we're missing. We don't need to deny that it happened. It happened. But what can we do? How can we grow as people to ensure it does not happen again? Yeah, I may, we're only, I guess, about 2 or 3 hours from Montgomery. And somebody said it's still happening. Yes, it is. So it's a day trip that I think my husband and I might take to Montgomery, because I think Atlanta's only about 3 hours from Montgomery. So yeah.
Thank you, Kenneth and Suzanne. Kenneth, do you have, are you able to screen share and we can see the song now as a closing?
Oh, strange fruit, yes.
Um, how do I screen share that? I'm not sure how to.
Don't worry about it. If you can just put the link
I
in.
can play it and you can hear it, I think.
Okay, that'd be fine. If we
I
can,
think that
we should
would,
be able to hear it.
I think that's a possibility.
It might not be real clear, but we'll go for it.
Yeah, it was recorded toward the beginning of the pandemic, so that's the initial part there.
Okay. Your volume's gonna have to be really loud though, I think.
Crazy times, huh? March 11th, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic.
Is that part of it?
It seems as if the world has come to a screeching halt. And in times like these, it's natural for everyone to be anxious and scared, not really sure of the future. There's a song that got us through one period in time. I believe that same song can get us through this period. So from my family, the aliens, and myself, just simply want to say, hold on. Let's keep each other in prayer. And at the end of this, we can say we use this time to reset, to relax, and to recalibrate and become more connected with community. Such a beautiful thing. I've seen more of my neighbors in these last few weeks than I've ever seen. So hold on, and we'll get through this together.
Yes, I think we're gonna have to share the link because whenever you try to play it like that, it will, there's a tendency for it to cut in and out. So we can share the link and you guys can pick up the link yourself because we're right at 240, 142. Yeah, if you could do that, that would be awesome. And also, while he's doing that, I would like to say one part of our event today was going to be on Mahalia Jackson and Aretha Franklin and their part in the civil rights era. If you guys don't mind researching that for yourselves, because they both played a very critical role in the civil rights era. When Aretha Franklin started, she was 12 years old, and I think Mahalia Jackson was 42, 43, somewhere in there, because she was quite a bit older, but she was the mentor for Aretha Franklin. But they both of their music styles coming from the church were very important to Martin Luther King Jr. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but whenever Martin Luther King Jr. was actually struggling with the civil rights era, she was his go-to person because she would pray with him anytime, anywhere. She was with him on the March to Washington. She opened the event with a song on the March to Washington. She was there all the time, but people don't know that about her. Her style was more of a natural, relaxed kind of style, and you guys are aware of Aretha Franklin, And one of the songs that became pretty popular during the civil rights era for Aretha Franklin, she was young, was Think. Think. So I'm not going to share that link with you today because it's all over YouTube, but that's one I would encourage us all to do as we're about to leave this space, is to think. I love the idea. I mean, I just shared with someone recently about the art group and how we organize in 2020. But I looked this, I'm just grateful for how it has come together, evolved. You guys are from different parts of the United States. We're all culturally diverse, which is enriching to me because I take my mind also back to whenever the NAACP was organized. It wasn't just Black people. Whenever there was the Underground Railroad, as I said before, it wasn't just Black people. I don't know any Black person who actually had a house big enough or safe enough during the Underground Railroad to help runaway slaves. So you guys are here, not by chance, but because you're supposed to be. That's what I truly believe. And I appreciate the fact that it's just not me and Suzanne and Lena. And Tiffany, I think Tiffany's behind the scenes too. It's not just us, it's all of us. And I heard Christine talking about the book that she's reading. Why are you reading that book, Christine? You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me that. It's not a question I need an answer for. But I appreciate the fact that you are doing that because you are self-educating, and all those folks who are around you too. And the Caseys of the world. I could tell you, I could talk for another 30 minutes about Casey because she's been with us since the beginning. Since the beginning. Kenneth has done wonders for our group. Melissa's done tremendous work for our group. John has been here since the beginning. I think that's right. Anyway, he shows up. He shows up all the time. And just to have you guys here is just so, it feels so supportive. And you allowed us to share a little bit of history with you, but I determined from a long time ago, just to be honest with you and very factual, I have never been one who's going to say, well, let me tell you this about my history. I want to tell you more about my history. No, I'm an educator. I will tell you a little bit, and then I want you to have enough spark in you to go and learn more. Because we, in an hour and a half, which we already made it over time, we can't tell you all of them. I will never have that inclination to be your encyclopedia. I want you to learn, and I think you will, just snippets. Christine, what's the name of that book again that you're reading, the book club you're in?
The book is called Stride Toward Freedom.
Stride Toward Freedom. That's a slow move. That's a very slow move.
Written by Martin Luther King Jr. On the bus boycott, and the book club I'm in is called Embracing Nonviolence.
Where are you from? Where are you dialing in from?
Loveland, Colorado.
Wow. Casey's from Colorado.
Oh,
you're very close, aren't you? She's in I can't remember. I can't remember.
Isn't
Oh my
she
God.
California?
Like
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you guys, maybe you need to get together. That book sounds amazing. Do you do book clubs often?
I've started because of our current situation. I've started joining book clubs.
Are you the leader or just a member?
Oh, just a member.
Okay. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being a part, and thank you for sharing your experiences with us. And Suzanne, what was the name of the book that you were talking about? Because what I'd like to do is at least get the names of the books, and hopefully we can have some, maybe our next book club, which should begin in January, Suzanne.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's called The Fourth Turning, and it looks at history from 80 to 100-year spans. Okay. And so the high is where we're going. So I'm excited about the high.
It's where we are right now.
No, we're in crisis.
Okay,
Crisis, and some people have called it calamity. Yes. The high is where we're going. And the high lasts about 20 years. And then so that'll be, I'm sorry, Gary. So the high is where we're going to be from 2030 to about 2050. The awakening, where the new ideas, again, it's really building on the high. That's from like about 2050 to 2070. Then we have the unraveling. The unraveling will happen because people will seem to forget. And the unraveling will last about another 20 years, and you'll have the crisis. And they have done documented evidence and gone back and looked at history and saw how this pattern repeats itself. So it's called the fourth turning.
And Melissa, what is the fever in the heartland? What is
Yeah.
that about?
Yeah, I just stuck that in there. I just finished that. It's uh, about the ascension of the KKK after the Civil War and into the 20s. They outlined, and I knew from growing up in Indiana that Indiana had had a pretty key role in developing the Ku Klux Klan in the North. and it talks about it's all about the Grand Dragon there, uh, just the influence that he had, and it's super. It's just super educational and informative. It's written more, I mean, even though it's a nonfiction book, it's written more like a novel in terms of how
Mhm.
the story goes. Uh, but I was shocked in how how strategic and out like non-secretive it all was. I mean, because and it was certainly informative for me because I grew up um, learning that it was kind of this, even though it was very prevalent, it was still kind of on the DL, and people weren't out in the open about it. But this really shows the strategic nature of the politics behind the KKK and the goals of getting, judges involved, and how folks were like, these people were like out and proud kind of thing, which I had no idea. And the other kind of scary part of it was, when we talk about looking at history, there were a lot of parallels for what's going on. You could trade the name MAGA for KKK, and it was a learning experience, shall we say, just because on a lot of different levels, but it was super good, super informative and disturbing and all the things that it should be. So I
Mhm.
encourage people. I mean, it would be a good book club book just because it is also written um, in a story form. So
Yeah.
Wow.
uh,
I want to tell you guys something too then, and along the same lines. Um, and I thought about this too. I'm in a book club too, but it's a Bible book club that I go to every week at a church. And we are going through the Old Testament right now. We're in the book of Esther. If you dare to read the book of Esther, you're going to be reading about today. That's all I'm going to say. Nothing is happening in a vacuum. There's an awareness about everything. And so that also keeps me grounded to know that this does not last forever and it doesn't happen without consent. That's the
yeah.
way, that's the way I grew up. I believe that. So anyway, so we have the possibility of Suzanne leading the book club or Melissa or maybe even Christine. It would be great to connect somehow, but we usually always have a book club starting in January. I don't have anything organized for a book club right now. But before I do that though, I want to make sure that we saw did you put the link in the chat, Kenneth?
I
For that.
saw it. I saw it.
You did see it? Okay.
No, I clicked on it. I clicked on it.
Oh, you
It's
clicked on
there.
it. Okay, got
It's
it.
there. Uh-huh.
Okay, okay, so university. Cool. I'll find this on YouTube then.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
wrote that there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
And this was like a rich discussion. I knew we were going to get to everything I had organized here. So if you guys would please check out Aretha Franklin's position in the civil rights era and Mahalia Jackson. Mahalia Jackson is like strategic. She was strategic. Thank you
Mhm.
for being here. I've already sent out the calendar for the next 3 months. If you didn't get it, I'll resend it soon. But hoping that we'll have a book club started in January.
Okay.
I'll be talking to people that have led them before, and we'll see. Maybe you guys can co-lead it
Mhm.
or triple lead it. Doesn't matter how you decide to do that. But
Mhm.
I am just so pleased with this event today. Thank you guys for showing up. I want you to say where you're dialing in from though, because I know where most of you are from. I know Kenneth's from Texas, my home state. I'm in Illinois. Casey's in Colorado. Suzanne's in Georgia. Christine's
Mhm.
in Colorado. Melissa's in Arizona. John's in Illinois. Andrew's in Illinois. And Lena's in Virginia or West Virginia? Virginia.
Virginia.
Virginia. Okay. So we're just from all over the place. And we're trying to get more people invited in. So if you guys know other people who want to come in, if our book club gets to the point that it is so big, we have breakout rooms.
Mhm.
I can see that happening. If we have breakout rooms, we can have two book clubs going at one time. Think about it. Think about it. Yeah. Oh, Tiffany, where are you dialing in from? I'm sorry. Virginia Beach?
Okay. Yeah, Virginia Beach.
Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah, this is quite enriching. So thank you guys for being here and participating and hanging out. We're overtime by 5 minutes. Casey, get that laptop
Oh,
up.
she's
We
a
didn't even
Navy
get to hear
vet.
your voice today, but I'm glad you showed up. Good to see you.
Miss Malone,
Uh-huh.
Miss Evelyn, Tiffany says she is a Navy vet. So we say thank you for your service. Thank
Oh
you
my
for
gosh, I didn't see
everything you
that.
do. Yeah, she just said put in the chat. She said, yeah. She said
Tiffany, could you come off mute and talk with us just for a split second?
I think she decided out, but I don't know.
You're still
Yes,
here.
yes, ma'am. I'm still here.
Okay.
Oh, good.
All right.
Thank you for all that you do. Your
Yes,
service.
thank you.
Oh, no, no thanks needed. Thank you all for this group. Actually, I was just in DC a couple days before the National Guardsmen were attacked. We were there